Okay. I know what you're all thinking. What the earth has got to do with Christmas Island? Well, the answer is simple. Nothing. But what it has to do with is why I'm standing here tonight doing this presentation. I notice there's quite a few Freemasons in the room tonight. How many of you actually know somebody called Ray Allen? Anyone? Come on. Come on, there's more than one. Okay. Ray Allen is the reason I'm here tonight. Raymond was a good friend of mine. I moved to Cornwall. Every time I came back to Reading, he kept telling me about Cornwall, how wonderful it was, and he wished he lived there. And I said, well, we'll live there. It's not a problem. What's wrong with Cornwall? You don't have to live in Maidenhead. Anyway, next time I come up, I bought him a box of Cornish goodies. And he was absolutely over the moon. And I couldn't understand why he was so excited. I didn't pay that much for them. But he said, Gav, I'm going to put something in the post for you. And he did. He sent me this. Now, you can't read that, but it says, The Big Adventures of a London Vackie. He was evacuated to Cornwall as a young lad of 6 years old. And he lived in Cornwall with people who become his surrogate mum and dad for 4 years. And you just have to think, how on earth these kids in those days could be taken away, well, they weren't taken away from their mum and dads, but went from their mum and dad to go and live in a strange part of the world with strange people. It happened. When I got it, Ray Allen, there's only one can agree with me on here, and he's sitting over there, was quite a comedian. This story is brilliant. So I phoned him up and said, look, Ray, I've got your story. It's absolutely incredible. And I do the odd occasional talk in Cornwall, and I asked if I could use his article. And he said, of course, yes, of course you can, Gav. But why don't you write one of your own? Every time I met him after that, he said, Gavin, have you written your article yet? No. So he kept on at me until I did. And that's what brings me here tonight. It is basically a story. And this story starts when I was a young lad of just 14 and a half years old. My favourite subject at school was technical drawing. And the teacher came up and said, you know, Gav, you should consider being a draftsman. Well, I didn't know what a draftsman was anyway. But he gave me 2 names of 2 companies I should write to, which I did. And I did hear back from both of them to tell me I was hopeless. I didn't qualify to go to their apprentice course because I was in a secondary modern school and not from a grammar school. So there we go, failed at the first juncture. But I was an army cadet. And when I went to training the following week, there was a big poster. Join the army and learn a trade. Down the list, draftsman. So I did. Took the entrance exam and ended up, and I hope I'm going to get this right this time, ladies and gentlemen, there. Now, how many of you recognize that place? 1? Come on, there's more than that. 2? Yes, it's the Army Apprentices College at Arborfield. And as a 15-year-old lad, just 15, I stood in front of those gates, absolutely petrified to go through them. Until someone came out, greeted me, and said, Gavin, are you here to join? I said, yes, come on in. Took me around, made me feel welcome. 3 years later, I walked back out of those gates as a qualified draftsman. So you see, they were wrong. I also thought that I was a soldier, because I'd spent 3 years in the army until they moved me to the Royal Engineers training camp at Cove near Farnborough. The worst 6 months I have ever experienced in my life. And if I thought I was a soldier when I went in there, I knew I was when I came out. My pal, who was hoping to be here tonight, was on Christmas Island with me, and he was also at 9 training regiment with us. Every time we meet up, which is probably a couple of times a year, the only thing we talk about is Cove. But we went from Cove to the School of Military Engineering at Chatham to further the trade training as a draftsman, come out as a second-class draftsman after 6 months, and called into the office. Gav, you're going to Christmas Island. Oh, where's that? They didn't know. But you're going there, Gav. So they sent me away to get kitted out, which they needn't have bothered with, a couple of pairs of shorts, a floppy hat, and do people know here what puttees are?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. The bandages you put around the top of your boots to stop the sand going in them. So there we were, off to Christmas Island. Her Majesty's troop ship Dunera, down to Southampton, boarded up, ready to go off to the South Pacific. Lovely. Now my wife has been on at me for years and years to go on a cruise. I said, sorry, I've already been on one. I don't want to go on another one. Well, she actually got me on there this year, and it wasn't quite as bad as this one. I don't know why. But anyway, there we are. So I've been on the cruise now, so she's happy. This is why I didn't want to go on a cruise. This was our living quarters. By the time we got to the Caribbean, it stunk. I couldn't live in there. So I found a place on deck, and that suited me for the rest of the journey. Now, the rest of the journey was quite interesting. Because of my age, obviously I was born before the war, and I'd seen a lot of poverty and a lot of hardship, I thought. But when we went through the Caribbean, we stopped up for Curacao, and we were having a cricket match between the lads on the ship and the natives of Curacao. It was a good match, but the thing that struck me, and this is what my story is about really at the moment, is things that struck me as I was on the way to Christmas Island. Now, you'll have to understand that when I was a young lad, you won't understand, you're a young lad there because you've got phones and photographs and everything. We didn't have cameras and photographs, so I'm very limited to the photographs I can show you. But this one here, that is Curacao. That was taken online to give you an idea. The poverty and people living in those conditions, I'd never seen anything like it, not even in Reading. So there we were. That was Curacao. From there, we ended up traveling to Panama, the Panama Canal. An absolutely incredible feat of engineering. Has anyone been through the Panama Canal? Yeah, it's unbelievable, isn't it? And it really struck me as something special. This is the same boat, by the way. It looks like an aircraft carrier there, but it wasn't. That's still the Dunera going through one of the canal locks. Now, the other thing that struck me about the Panama Canal, and the people that just put their hands up, I'm sure will agree with me, was the wildlife. Unfortunately, I didn't have a camera, but I did have a friend that went through the Panama Canal last year, and I phoned him up and asked if he had any pictures. Yes, he said. So he sent me some pictures. Now, I'm going to quickly run through these, but it'll give you an indication of the amazing wildlife as you went through this incredible canal. That's a crocodile, by the way. I don't know what the other things are. At the end of that, we ended up in Panama itself to fuel up before going on from there to Christmas Island. When we were getting off the ship, the captain came on the tannoy, And he said, look, lads, just to let you know, you're going to Panama City. This isn't the UK. You don't go around in groups, certainly of less than 4. You don't move away from the high street. When we got there, we understand what he was talking about. Just before going to Christmas Island, I mean, we've all done it. I used to read the Sunday newspaper, and there was the headlines, London, the wickedest city in the world. Well, I haven't got a clue who wrote that, but whoever wrote it had never been to Panama City. That's a fairly recent picture, but it was pretty awful, and certainly I understand what the captain was saying, that we weren't to go around in small groups, and I think most of us could handle ourselves anyway, but it was awful. I mean, in London, you'd buy a newspaper and put the money by the side of it. Over there, they'd have cut your throat for the same amount. It was that bad. We went from there then to Christmas Island. And as you all know, because I've just told you, it's in the South Pacific. Halfway sort of between Hawaii and Fiji, roughly. I don't know. But that gives you an idea of where it was. It's a long way from anywhere. But we arrived on the island, and when we come off the ship, we were loaded onto trucks, and we taken to what they called then was the main camp. On the way there on these trucks, the place was absolutely amazing. A coral island in the Pacific, lovely sunshine. It was idyllic. So we drove down there, and I just couldn't take my eyes off the place. And we eventually arrived here. I don't know those guys, honestly. But I do understand and recognize those tents, because that was in the main camp, and in one of those two is where I stayed for the next 12 months. It didn't look like that when we arrived there, because there were beds in there. These lads probably put the tents up. But that's what it was like. There were no sides to the tents, and when we arrived, we looked in, and there was the beds, and a wooden box, which was your cabinet, and a mosquito net over your bed, which seemed strange because there was no mosquitoes on Christmas Island. What there was, of course, were land crabs. And the whole point of the mosquito net that we had to tuck in each night was because they crawl all over it. There are loads of them. They're land crabs. And on the first one you saw them by the sea, so you might have thought they were all on the beach. They wandered all over the place. Not quite as many as that, but in the morning when you woke up, there was always 2 or 3 crabs on your mosquito net, which just got a flick and they went off. Let's go back to here. Because I say the mosquito net was one thing that thought was a little bit strange. The other thing was the toilet facilities. Because outside the tent, just outside the front here, were the wash basins, a row of them, with a pipe coming from the sea, because the water was piped from the sea. In the morning it was warm. In the evening it was a lot hotter. The showers were basically a concrete block with a shower on, no privacy. You just took your clothes off, got up there and showered, which really wasn't a problem, because there were no ladies on the island, so what the hell, didn't matter. The toilets were a bit basic too. Elson pans, but they were separated by a Hessian sheet. No doors. You just took it as it came. And that's where we lived for 12 months. We'd been there about 6 or 7 weeks, and we were told that we were going to witness our first nuclear bomb. Now, Eddie can tell you more about these things than I can, but it was 3 megaton, which is probably the biggest bomb ever airdropped. We didn't know that. But the same thing, we were taken by trucks to the back of a coconut grove where we sat. I think the coconut grove was to save us from the blast, although how that was going to work, I haven't got a clue. But we had a tannoy system, so we heard all that was going on, and they gave us the information what we had to do. We had to sit down with our backs to the blast, our hands over our eyes, and our eyes tightly closed. They then told us the Valiant bomber had left. Well, we didn't need to tell us because you could see it. Christmas Island was beautiful, the sky was clear, and there was the vapor train, so we knew what the Valiant bomber was doing. And then bomb dropped, and we knew that too because the plane went in a different direction, fast. And then we had the countdown, and that's when we were told we had to sit down, hands over eyes closed tight, and we were not to take our hands off our eyes. Then, woomph. The blast, the light, and you've probably heard this on the television anyway, because everyone they ask about it says the same thing. You had your eyes closed, your hands over your eyes, the light was so bright you were looking at an X-ray, because there was your bones in your fingers. So that's probably why you had to keep your eyes closed. I don't know what happened to the crabs there, though. But anyway, it was an experience that you can't explain to people. But it was an experience. And then we sat and watched this explosion look like a big ball of molten metal bubbling in the sky. And it appeared to be almost right over your head. And of course it wasn't. It was a bit farther away, but it was big. And this molten metal just bubbled until it turned into the most beautiful white cloud you could ever wish to see. An incredible sight. I can't explain it very well, and I've tried before, but you can't experience this. What I'm going to show you now is a video of the bomb. While I was there, we saw 5. 3 H-bombs, 2 atom bombs. The 2 atom bombs were detonated on the island, and I'll come back to that in a minute. The first video you're going to see was in 1957, and obviously I didn't see that one, but what it does do is it gives a very good explanation of the bomb and its formation. The second one, the video, is of the bomb, the first bomb we saw, which was the one of 3 megaton. And I might stop that halfway through because it's so big, they showed it filmed from 5 different directions, so you've almost got the same thing 5 times. But let's start with number 1.
Grapple X was the code name for the 4th British test explosion in the megaton range, which took place at 8:45 a.m. local time on Friday the 8th of November 1957. The weapon was dropped from a Valiant bomber of the Royal Air Force. The explosion took place at a position a few miles off the southeastern tip of Christmas Island. Behind the blast front, there is a ring of white cloud spreading from the fireball. This is the Wilson cloud, which occurs in the suction phase of the blast wave. In order to minimize fallout, the explosion took place high in the air, and the fireball did not touch the sea. This record from A site shows the fireball rising and the mushroom stem developing. The fireball cools as it engulfs the cold surrounding air. This record from A site and the following one from B site were both taken by remotely controlled cameras. The filter on this camera at B site was burnt by the heat of the explosion. All cameras were running at normal speed. The bottom of the mushroom stem has now become sharply defined. and a condensation column has formed in the moist atmosphere underneath it. This condensation column does not contain any of the radioactivity produced by the explosion. The cloud still rises, but now much more slowly. The mushroom stem left behind by the cloud can be distinguished from the condensation column. Condensation also occurs in the air which is pushed ahead of the rising cloud, water vapor condensing directly into ice crystals to form an ice cap. At Seasite, King Strand buildings are used for storage and for instrumentation equipment. The side panels facing the explosion were badly buckled by the blast wave. A vapor trail in the sky marks the passage of one of the Canberra sampling aircraft, which is flying directly into the cloud to obtain samples of cloud-borne explosion products. These will be flown back to Aldermaston for radiochemical analysis. For a long time after the explosion, the mushroom cloud spreads across the sky until it is gradually pulled out of its original shape and then dispersed by the winds at high altitudes.
Right, that was bomb number one. The second one was the 3 megaton bomb, was the first one that we visited.
Rappel-Y explosion was photographed from several positions on Christmas Island at varying distances from the explosion. This is a typical rear camera station. Conventional 35mm cameras are used, Vinton 300s, to record fireball detail at a camera speed of 100 frames a second, and Camaflexes for normal 24 frames operation. Cameras received their final checking and were loaded the evening before the explosion. At A site, or forward position, cameras are protected by resin-bonded fiberglass cowlings. One normal speed 35mm camera was used here, the remainder being high-speed Eastman Kodaks and Fastaxes. The Valiant which will drop the weapon will also photograph the explosion. Two 16mm GSAP service cameras are mounted in the tail of the aircraft and will record the fireball and the early stages of the development of the stem as the aircraft turns and flies away from the target area. This Shackleton aircraft carries a cameraman with a 35mm Ariflex camera. It will orbit the target area at a considerable distance to photograph the burst from the air. Natural cloud did not obscure the view from the Shackleton, and useful pictures were obtained of the initial stages and subsequent development. The Wilson cloud can be seen spreading outwards from the fireball. This effect occurs in the suction phase of the blast wave. Cloud obscured the earlier fireball stages in scenes from this position. A good picture, however, was obtained of the rising fireball. The fireball is now cooling rapidly as it rises. The mushroom stem has developed. As the Valiant flies away from the explosion, the cameras in the tail photograph the fireball from a high altitude. This first film was filtered to record the fireball and the detail of the Wilson cloud condensation rings. Both this record and the following one were taken on 16mm Kodachrome and enlarged up to 35mm Eastman color for inclusion in this film. They were taken at 16 frames a second and are being projected here at 24 frames a second. This record has not been filtered. Note how the detail has been lost in the fireball and in the rings. The mushroom stem is developing and the beginning of the condensation spike can be seen. A further illustration of the Wilson cloud effect is visible in this condensation cloud, which rises to obscure the top of the column. The sound of the explosion does not reach this rear camera station for some considerable time after the flash. Back now to the Shackleton circling the target area. An ice cap is forming in the air pushed ahead of the rising cloud. This record, taken by a Camaflex camera at A site, one of the forward positions, was partially obscured by cloud and dust. The camera was elevated to give this impressive sequence covering the underside of the fireball, the growth of the hollow stem, and the formation of the condensation column. The cloud is still growing and spreading, but is now rising much more slowly. The record from A site has now become almost completely obscured by cloud and by smoke from fires in the forward area.
Okay, so you've seen the picture of two H-bombs. The two atom bombs were actually detonated on the island. Now that was a little bit more scary because the island was only 20 miles long by 12 miles wide. The first bomb that went off, we were in the same position as we were for the H-bombs, behind the coconut grove. And there was a lot of complaints because we didn't see much of it. We heard the bang, we saw the flash, and we saw the top of the mushroom. But we didn't see much because we were stuck behind these trees. And so there was a few complaints about it. So the next time, they put us in a different position so we could get a different view. Now, this was incredible, but the bomb itself wasn't dropped on the island, it was detonated from a barrage balloon, so it was suspended. I haven't got a video, but there we are. We were across the bay looking at that, which was quite an incredible sight. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. The blast of the atom bomb was 1,000 times, and I'm sure the atom bomb, not the H-bomb, Eddie, that was 1,000 times more powerful than the blast that led to leveling Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Quite horrendous. But let's go to here now, and let's have a look at Nagasaki. Before the blast, you've got the houses and you've got the church. This goes back to 1920, so obviously that was some time before the actual explosion, because this year is the 80th anniversary, Eddie, of the dropping the bomb, and those two bombs actually ended totally the Second World War. This was Nagasaki after the bomb was dropped. And as you can see, apart from the framework of the church, there wasn't very much left standing. But of course, Christmas Island wasn't all about bombs, although we've heard a lot of, I'll go on to that part later. But as a young lad of 19, to me, it was the experience of a lifetime. I'm now 86, so I haven't suffered like many other people have, and again, we'll come to that. So I see Christmas Island and the bombs totally different to the way that perhaps other people do. It was just an incredible experience. But as I say, it wasn't all about bombs. Christmas Island was an incredible island. And there was plenty to do. Unfortunately, I don't have too many pictures to show you that, but I do have one. We had beach parties most nights, well, not most nights, now and again. We go down the beach, and all you needed to join the beach party was a crate of beer, which of course is sat in the open air all day long, which didn't taste very good until you got through maybe 4 cans. But what you had to do, you just got on the beach, joined a circle of people and act the fool. You sang, danced, told silly stories, but we just had a lot of fun. And that's probably why I can talk tonight, because I learned a lot from those parties. And then of course we had the lagoon. The lagoon was absolutely beautiful, and a short walking distance from the tents. On the island, we worked with one of the natives. Now, the Gilbertese natives, unfortunately, like the Hawaiian people, were very short and very stumpy, big musculars, and so the guy that we worked with, and he was called Garth. Don't know why. But anyway, we used to go fishing with him in the lagoons of the weekend. And he used to make the spears, and we go around and spear the fish. Incredible times. But the one thing that struck me there, when we caught them, and he'd get some clay from around the lagoon, pack it around the fish, we'd stick it on a fire and leave it. 15, 20 minutes later, it cracked. The fish was cooked. very primitive way of pressure cooking, and the fish tasted lovely. And of course, it wasn't just that. We had a cinema that we could go and watch at nights. Beautiful. Open air, of course, which was lovely. You could watch the film for a few minutes, and then you get the frigate birds coming flying through the screen, and you had these massive birds going across the screen and spoiling your view. But at the end of the day, it was a cinema, so it was pretty good. So I've talked about Christmas Island as I saw it. But of course, in the news in the last few years, and I had a call from Susie Boniface about 10 years ago. She asked who I was. I told her, "You were on Christmas Island," yes. And we had a long chat. And it's taken a totally different view for me, because I've started to see some of the things that's gone wrong. Before that, I hadn't even considered it. The last bomb we saw, and saw on the screen there, I was asked if I would work with a survey sergeant, and we went out and surveyed the site where the barrage balloon was going to be suspended, which we did. A nice break for me. I got out the drone office, we went out, and we did a survey around the area where the bomb was going to be suspended. I don't know, can't remember now because I'm getting on a bit. It was 7 to 10 days afterwards, we were back there. Same site, just boots and shorts, and of course our puttees and a floppy hat, to survey the site again. Now you look at it and it seems absolutely stupid. But it happened, and unfortunately I'm still here to tell the tale. But of course many people haven't. And prior to leaving the island, we were coming back to the UK, and I'm not somebody that thinks about life and contemplates things too much, but I sat on the beach on my own. It was a beautiful evening, coming back to the UK. 10 days after I arrived in the UK, I was to be married. And I couldn't remember what my wife looked like. And I thought, well, God, what happens if I don't recognise her? And, you know, when I got off the train in Wokingham. That was that, and then you think of the year you spent there and the test. And I thought then, thank God we're never ever going to see one of these things dropped in earnest. Now, I must admit, it worries me a little bit. So there we are. That was my experience at Christmas Island. But now, of course, we've got the take today. And there's this question here. I had another call from Susie Boniface a couple of years ago, and she said, "Oh, Gav, do you know you're getting a medal?" So what for? Well, Christmas Island. The veterans are getting a medal. I said, well, she says, "You haven't heard from the MOD?" "No, I haven't heard anything." Well, she said, "I'll send you an application form." This was Susie Boniface, who was working with the Daily Mirror, who was going to send me an application form to get my medal from Christmas Island. I phoned up my pal who was on the island with me and said, "Ray, have you got notification from the MOD about a medal?" "No." "Oh, I'll send you a copy of my application when we come in, when it comes in." And we both send off our applications, and we both got our medals. Mine, which is sitting over there, you can have a look at if you wish. We didn't hear from the MOD. That was two of us that was on the island. I don't know how many were that didn't hear. But then about 3 months later, we got a letter from the MOD saying it was to be presented at a ceremony in London. And we had to, if we wanted to go, they'd pay our fares to get there, and we'd be presented with the medal we'd already got. Okay. So I phoned Ray up. I said, are you going to this thing in London, Ray? Oh, he said, no. Because he has a daughter that's handicapped, fairly severely handicapped. I have a daughter that's also handicapped, semi-handicapped, but we don't know. May have nothing at all to do with Christmas Island, but we have no idea. And he said, well, I was thinking of going, and he said, my daughter said there's no way I'm to go to a ceremony to present a medal for her suffering. I said, well, that makes sense, Ray. I'm not going to be there either. My medal's there, and I'm certainly not going to wear it. I didn't earn a medal for being on Christmas Island. It was the best year I ever had in my life. But it will go to my daughter when I'm not here, because she probably deserves it more than I do. I wrote to the MOD, and I asked them, why did it take them 65 years to decide that we deserved a medal? I also asked them what the tests were all about, because surely it wasn't just to see how big it could make a bomb. Surely it was to see the effect on the environment and the people that were sat there. And as you can see from the words there, and I'll come away, it's 2 years now since my letter, and I'm still waiting for a reply, but I'm not really expecting one. So it makes you very suspicious of the government and the country that we're with and who's ruling it. And I've never felt that, because I've always thought Britain was the best place in the world. I just wonder now whether you ever get the truth. So there we are. The last question. If there was no dangers, why was the test ban treaty enforced? Now, somebody sitting over there may be able to answer that one. But they must have felt there was something wrong, that future tests had to be done differently. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the end of my story, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Thank you.